The sun was setting, painting the sky with shades of orange and red. The streets of the small town were filled with the sounds of chatter, shopkeepers calling out their prices, and children running home for dinner. In the middle of it all walked a poor boy, barefoot, with dust on his clothes and sadness in his eyes. His stomach growled loudly, but he had no money, no family nearby, and no food to fill his hunger. He had been searching all day for work, hoping someone would give him a few coins. But no one wanted to hire a weak, thin boy who looked as if the wind itself could blow him away. Every step he took became heavier, yet his nose caught a smell so delicious, so warm, that his heart suddenly beat faster. It was bread. From a small bakery at the corner of the street, the fragrance of freshly baked bread filled the air. The boy stopped in front of the shop window and pressed his small hand against the glass. Inside, he saw golden loaves, soft rolls, and sweet cakes lined neatly on wooden shelves. His mouth watered, and for a moment, he forgot his tiredness. Gathering courage, he pushed the shop's wooden door open. A little bell above the door rang softly. The bakery was warm, and the glow of the oven lit the room like a gentle fire. Behind the counter stood the baker, a man with kind but serious eyes, dusted in flour from head to toe. He looked at the boy and immediately understood his condition. "Good evening, son," the baker said, wiping his hands on his apron. "What brings you here?" The boy's voice trembled, but he managed to speak. "Sir, I am very hungry. Could you please give me a piece of bread? I don't have any money. Just one slice, please." The baker stared at him for a moment. His eyes softened, but his lips curved into a thoughtful smile. He leaned forward on the counter and asked gently, "Tell me, my boy, do you think bread is free?" The boy's face lit up with a little hope. He quickly nodded, "Yes, sir. I thought maybe, if someone is kind, they can give food to the hungry without asking anything in return." The baker shook his head slowly. His voice was firm, yet not unkind. "My son, nothing in this world is free. Every loaf of bread has a cost. The flour must be bought, the dough must be kneaded, and the oven must be heated with fire. Even my time and effort are not free. Someone always pays the price." The boy's heart sank. His dream of eating the golden bread faded, and he lowered his eyes to the ground. Quietly, he whispered, "Then I guess I will go hungry tonight too." As he turned to leave, the baker called out, "Wait. If you truly want the bread, you don't have to beg for it. You can earn it." The boy stopped in his tracks, hope flickering again in his eyes. What could the baker mean? And thus began the lesson that would change his life forever. The boy froze at the baker's words. He turned back slowly, his wide eyes searching the man's face for an answer. "Earn it," he whispered. "But how can I earn it? I have no money." The baker smiled gently and shook his head. "Earning does not always mean money, my boy. There are many kinds of work, and every kind has value. If you are willing to put in a little effort, you will have your bread." The boy's heart filled with both relief and nervousness. For the first time in days, someone wasn't turning him away. He stepped closer to the counter and asked shyly, "What do I need to do?" The baker looked around his shop. The day had been busy, and crumbs and dust lay scattered across the wooden floor. He pointed toward the broom leaning against the wall. "Take that broom," he said. "Sweep my shop. Clean it well. When the work is done, you will earn your bread." The boy stared at the broom, almost in disbelief. In all his wandering, no one had ever offered him food in exchange for work. Most people scolded him, sent him away, or ignored his hunger. Now, here was a man giving him not charity, but a chance. Hesitant but determined, the boy picked up the broom. His small hands wrapped around its handle, and with a deep breath, he began sweeping. The dust rose in clouds, making him cough, but he didn't stop. He swept under the shelves, behind the counter, and around the oven. Every stroke of the broom was filled with hope, because with each movement he imagined the warm bread waiting for him at the end. The baker, standing by the counter, watched silently. He didn't step in to help, nor did he rush the boy. Instead, he let the boy discover something powerful, the value of effort. Minutes passed, then nearly an hour. The boy's arms grew tired, and sweat rolled down his forehead, but he kept working. Finally, when the shop floor looked cleaner than it had in days, the boy leaned on the broom, breathing hard but smiling faintly. The baker walked over, inspecting the floor carefully. He nodded in approval. "Well done, my boy. You worked hard, and you did not give up. Now, you have truly earned your reward." He went to the shelf, picked up a loaf of warm, golden bread, and placed it gently in the boy's hands. The boy's eyes widened, tears filling them. The bread felt heavier than gold, because it wasn't just food, it was the result of his labor. As the boy took his first bite, the baker leaned down and said quietly, "Remember this lesson. Nothing is free in this world. Even kindness has a price, but when you work for what you want, it tastes sweeter than anything given without effort." The boy nodded, chewing slowly, savoring each bite. Deep inside, he knew he would never forget this moment. The boy sat on a small wooden stool in the bakery, holding the warm loaf in his hands. The crust was golden and crisp, and the smell was so rich it seemed to fill not just his nose but his entire heart. His stomach growled loudly, reminding him how long it had been since his last proper meal. But before taking another bite, he paused. Something inside him told him that this bread was different. It wasn't a gift, nor a piece of charity thrown at him with pity. This bread had meaning. It carried the weight of his sweat, his tired arms, and the broom he had pushed across every inch of the shop. For the first time in his young life, he felt a strange kind of pride. The baker, still watching from behind the counter, noticed the boy's thoughtful expression. He smiled to himself, for this was exactly the lesson he had hoped the boy would learn. "Well, son," the baker said, "how does it taste?" The boy took a slow bite. The bread was soft inside, warm enough to melt on his tongue. His eyes closed as he chewed, savoring the flavor. He had eaten scraps before, sometimes even food from the streets, but nothing had ever tasted like this. He swallowed and whispered, "It's the most delicious bread I've ever had." The baker chuckled. "And do you know why? Because you earned it. When you work for something, even the simplest bread feels like a feast." The boy looked up at him, tears shining in his eyes. "I never thought work could make food taste better. I thought free food would make me happiest, but this feels different." The baker nodded. "That is because nothing is truly free. If someone gives you something without effort, it can fill your stomach, but it will never fill your heart. Effort gives value to everything. Today, you didn't just eat, you earned your meal." The boy's chest swelled with pride at those words. For so long, he had felt powerless, like a beggar waiting for scraps of kindness. But now, with a broom in his hand and sweat on his brow, he realized he was capable of earning, of working, of building a life for himself. As he finished the bread, the baker poured him a small cup of water and set it beside him. "Remember this day," the baker said softly. "Hunger may visit you again, but so will opportunity. Whenever you are in need, don't ask for things for free. Offer your hands, your time, your effort. That way, you will never feel small, and you will never feel ashamed." The boy nodded, clutching the last piece of bread as though it were treasure. Deep in his heart, he made a silent promise: never again would he beg. From now on, he would earn whatever he needed. Outside, the evening sky had turned dark, but for the boy, the world suddenly felt brighter. He had discovered something greater than food. He had discovered his own worth. The years passed quickly, and the little boy who once begged for bread grew taller, stronger, and wiser. The memory of that day in the bakery never left him. He could still remember the warmth of the oven, the kind but firm voice of the baker, and the taste of that loaf, the first meal he had ever truly earned. After that day, he promised himself he would never beg again. Whenever he was hungry, he offered his hands to work. Sometimes he carried water for neighbors, sometimes he swept streets, sometimes he helped shopkeepers arrange their goods. The jobs were small, but every coin he earned and every piece of food he received felt valuable, because it was paid for with effort. As he grew into a young man, he discovered that the baker's lesson applied to more than just bread. At school, he wasn't the smartest boy, but he studied harder than anyone else. While others gave up on difficult lessons, he stayed up late with a small candle, reading and practicing until the words made sense. He told himself, "If I can earn bread with a broom, I can earn knowledge with effort." When he began working, he took the lowest jobs, the ones no one else wanted. He swept shops, carried heavy loads, and cleaned storerooms. His clothes were still plain, and his hands rough, but inside, he felt rich. Every coin he saved brought him closer to independence. People started to notice his honesty and hard work. Employers trusted him, customers respected him, and even strangers admired the way he never complained. But life wasn't always easy. There were days when he failed, when others mocked him, when he was tempted to take shortcuts. He saw people who lied and cheated their way to money, and sometimes he wondered if they were happier. But whenever he thought of giving in, the baker's voice returned to him like an echo. Nothing is free. Even if you get something without effort, you will pay for it later. Those words became his shield. He understood now that dishonesty carried its own hidden cost: loss of respect, loss of peace, and loss of dignity. So he stayed on the harder path, the slower path, the honest path. As the young boy turned into a man, his small earnings grew into larger ones. He learned new trades, invested his savings carefully, and slowly built a life for himself. People in his town began to say, "That young man will go far. He works harder than anyone else." And deep inside, he carried gratitude for the baker who had given him more than bread. The baker had given him a seed, a lesson that had grown into the foundation of his entire life. Every time he succeeded, every time he overcame difficulty, he whispered to himself the same truth. Nothing is free. Everything worth having must be earned. This lesson was no longer just a memory. It had become the rule by which he lived his life. Years passed, and the boy who once begged for bread had now become a man respected by all. His hair was neatly kept, his clothes clean, and his walk full of quiet confidence. Through hard work and honesty, he had built a small business of his own. At first, it was just a cart, then a little shop, and soon, he was able to employ others who also needed a chance, just as he once did. But despite his success, he never forgot where he had started. In his heart, he was still that hungry boy who had walked into a bakery with nothing but hope. He never allowed pride to blind him, and he always remembered the words that had shaped his life. Nothing is free. Everything worth having must be earned. One morning, as he was walking through the marketplace, he noticed a familiar smell, the warm, comforting aroma of bread baking in an oven. His feet slowed, and memories flooded back. He turned the corner and found himself standing in front of the same bakery he had once entered as a starving child. The shop looked older now. The wood was worn, the paint faded, but the scent of fresh bread was still the same. With a soft smile, he pushed open the door. The little bell above the door rang, just as it had years ago. Inside, behind the counter, stood the baker, older, with gray in his hair and wrinkles on his face, but his eyes still sharp and kind. The baker looked up and paused. Slowly, recognition lit his face. "You," the baker whispered. "You are that boy, the one who asked for bread." The man's heart swelled. He stepped forward, bowed his head respectfully, and said, "Yes, sir. I was that boy, and the bread you gave me that day was the first honest meal I ever had. You taught me that nothing in life is free, and I have carried that lesson with me ever since." The baker's eyes softened with pride. "And look at you now. You have done well for yourself. I only gave you bread, but you took the lesson and made it your life." The man smiled. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a heavy pouch of coins, and placed it gently on the counter. "Today, I want to pay back, not just for that bread, but for the wisdom you gave me. Please use this money to keep your bakery strong, and to feed children like I once was, but let them earn it, the way you taught me." The baker's hands trembled as he took the pouch. Tears filled his eyes, not because of the money, but because the seed he had planted so long ago had grown into such a fine man. That day, the man bought loaves of bread and carried them to the poor children of the town. But he didn't hand them out freely. Instead, he gave them small tasks, carrying water, sweeping, helping elders, so they too could feel the pride of earning. And as he watched them smile with their bread in hand, he whispered to himself. The baker was right. Nothing is free, but with effort, even the poorest child can taste success.